All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Timber for Transit Program information session. My name is Marina Bowie. I serve as the Forest Economy and Timber for Transit Programs Manager, and I'm joined by a few others from NBRC. I apologize that I can't see everyone, but I see Sarah Demers, who will be helping to answer some questions in the chat today. She serves as our program coordinator. I see a state program manager on. Hi, Christy. A Forest Economy Program Advisory Board member, and Kyle from the state of New York. Welcome, welcome. We will get started. I will ask folks to stay muted. We'll have plenty of time for questions throughout the presentation and at the end. And if you have questions as we go, feel free to send them into the chat sphere, and we'll have some NBRC staff answering questions there. All right, during this information session, we'll cover an overview of the Timber for Transit program, including the purpose and availability of funding. We'll cover eligibility, including some eligible locations, match requirements, eligible entities, and eligible purposes for funding. We'll also cover the pre-application process today. We used to refer to pre-applications as letters of interest, so just know that we're replacing that language for pre-applications. So we'll go over what that will look like for you all. We'll cover the timeline, process, and requirements for the pre-application, as well as what the evaluation will look like. And finally, we'll send you off with what's next, project development, NBRC office hours, and grant management system training, which is NBRC's new way of submitting, reviewing applications. And we'll include time for Q&A. All right, so this program is new in 2024. We're very excited to offer it. The program is designed to advance the use of domestic forest products in transportation infrastructure across Maine, New Hampshire, New York, and Vermont to showcase the capabilities of wood in these applications. For this program, the NBRC may award up to $25 million over the next 3 years for projects under this program. I'll mention that highly competitive projects will demonstrate and widely promote the utility of high-value forest products such as glue laminated timber, cross-laminated timber, and composite materials in transportation infrastructure, and commit to enhancing climate resiliency in our rural communities. Transportation infrastructure for this program will mean construction, alteration, or repair for the purpose of transporting people and goods, including fixed installations and rights of way necessary for transporting from one point to another, including infrastructure that improves economic mobility for individuals and may include roads, railways, airways, waterways, canals, terminals, such as airports, railway stations, bus stations, parking, refueling depots, and seaports. So we've taken a very wide definition of transportation infrastructure. All right, again, previously at NBRC, we have referred to the pre-application as a letter of interest. We've changed that verbiage this year as we are onboarding a new grants management system, which is very exciting for us. It enables us to collect applications online and to review things and have more data input there. Pre-applications are required and they're due by 5 p.m. on March 15th for the spring round and 5 p.m. September 6th for the fall round. So you will have 2 opportunities to apply for funding. And that's across all of NBRC's programs, including the Timber for Transit program. These pre-applications must be submitted online through our grants management system, and we're getting this up and running as we speak. New this year, if you're familiar with NBRC's other programs or you've applied in the past, all waiver requests, which there are 2 that may apply to you within this program, all waiver requests must be submitted with the pre-applications. The pre-applications will be reviewed by NBRC for eligibility and by state programs for alignment with program priorities. And then we'll issue invitations to apply. And then highlighted here, all pre-application details will be covered later in this session. So we'll go through all the questions you'll be asked. First, we'll cover eligibility, which is the first thing you want to determine for your project. No one wants to apply for something that they end up finding out they're not eligible for in the first place. So there are 3 points of eligibility that NBRC considers. The first is location. The second is applicant eligibility. And the third is eligible purposes of funding. So in terms of location, we'll go over the NBRC service area, our distress criteria, and your eligibility will inform the amount of match you're required to provide. So we'll go over that as well. In terms of, we'll go through all of the eligible applicant and co-applicant entities, and then eligible purposes of funding, which will dive a little bit deeper into what this funding, specifically in Timber for Transit, is set up to do. All right, by statute, the NBRC is required to annually assess the level of economic and demographic distress in our service area, and the resulting designations reflect whether the NBRC can provide grants within a county. So here you'll see a list of counties that are eligible for NBRC funding by state. And then on the right, you'll see some nice pictures, maps of our states. The dark green are distressed counties, the light green are transitional counties, and the light blue are attainment counties. And I'll go into a little bit more of what that means. All right, assessment of distress takes into consideration data points such as percent of population below the poverty line, unemployment rates, and median household income, among other statistics. Counties are then determined to be distressed, transitional, or attainment counties, which then informs NBRC's ability to fund in those areas and the associated match requirement of projects within a county. Attainment counties are not eligible to receive funding. However, occasionally in an attainment county, there are municipalities identified as isolated areas of distress, and these locations are eligible. If an applicant entity has a mailing address within an attainment county, but the project itself is focused in distressed and transitional counties, that applicant may apply for a significant benefit waiver, is what we call it. And that must be submitted at pre-application. So that's one of the waivers that may apply to you. Multi-county or multi-state projects that impact distressed and transitional counties may also be eligible for funding, and match is calculated based on an average of participating project counties. So you might not have exactly 20 or 50% match if your project serves multiple counties. It might be an average of those counties. And the match will be calculated in our grants management system according to the data that you put in. All right. So as I mentioned, the first step in your process should be to determine your eligibility, your entity's eligibility, and the project location eligibility. So you'll want to determine where the project is taking place, ensure that it's within NBRC's service area. determine whether the location is in a distress county, transitional, or attainment county. If you're in an attainment county, determine if the exceptions apply, whether there is an isolated area of distress, or if your project is serving distress and transitional counties, but you are located in an attainment county, then you'll need to submit a significant benefit waiver. Once you've determined the locations where the project will take place, you'll identify the reimbursement and match rate associated with that location. So as I mentioned, distressed counties qualify for 20% match, eligible counties transitional counties are eligible for 50% match. And then if you're serving multiple counties, a mix of distress and transitional, it'll be an average of those counties. Here is a list of eligible applicants and co-applicants: state governments, local governments, and subdivisions of states. Tribes and nonprofit entities are all eligible to receive NBRC funding. For-profit entities, LLCs, and other entities that are not a 501c are not eligible applicants for NBRC funding. And you'll input this information. You'll need to identify your entity type at the registration process in our grants management system. We'll get into that in a little more detail later on. Another level of eligibility we look at is whether an applicant has received funding from NBRC in the past. So please note that the Timber for Transit program is new. If you've applied for the Catalyst program in the past, you might be familiar with this requirement. It's also newly this year going to be a requirement for our forest economy program, so it's across the board. So if you have received any funding from NBRC, regardless of the program that you received funding from, you want to look and make sure that any prior funded projects have been at least 75% expended by March 1st. If it has not, then you can submit a 75% expenditure waiver, which must be submitted at time of pre-application. So we've gone over 2 waivers so far. The first is if your project serves distress or transitional counties, but your mailing address is within an attainment county, you want to submit that significant benefit waiver. If you have any prior funded projects that have not been 75% expended by March 1st, at time of pre-application, you will need to submit a 75% expenditure waiver. And we encourage you to have a conversation, if that's the case for you, with your state program manager who receives and approves or denies those 75% expenditure waivers. All right, we'll dive into a little more detail about the Timber for Transit program specifically. Projects must fit within one of the following categories. First, for this program, we will fund feasibility projects. And these types of projects will be identified at the time of pre-application, and you'll be eligible for between $250,000 and a maximum of $1 million. These types of projects could include state or regional inventory assessments of the suitability of wood components to address needed transportation infrastructure improvements or new construction. Feasibility projects could include architectural and engineering designs, cost analyses, and permitting necessary for the implementation of projects, as identified for the implementation projects. So we'll go into what implementation projects look like. Implementation projects, as a separate category, will be awarded between $1 and $5 million. They could include transportation infrastructure, which utilizes commercialized wood products and advanced wood materials to address climate adaptive transportation improvements. They could include design and construction of pilot and demonstration projects that showcase the capabilities and benefits of utilizing advanced wood materials in transportation infrastructure, including projects that are a hybrid of wood and traditional materials. For example, we could fund a permanent vehicular or pedestrian bridge that is publicly owned or where public access to privately owned land is documented. These could include trail bridges, covered bridges, culverts, and wildlife crossings. Another example is revitalization of existing or construction of new railway structures such as rail bridges. I will note that deferred maintenance projects will not be considered under this program. Another example could be waterfront transportation structures that utilize wood, and transportation adjacent structures that utilize advanced wood materials. Some examples of transportation adjacent structures would be highway rest stops, ferry terminals, train stations, etc. They could also include transportation infrastructure in support of outdoor recreation and tourism, and signage and utility transport infrastructure, highway sound barriers, and retaining walls. And then finally, your project could be a combination of feasibility and implementation. These projects are also eligible for a minimum of $1 million and a maximum of $5 million. For that maximum $5 million award, we will look for projects to demonstrate alignment with 2 or more of the funding priorities of the program, which I'll detail in the next slide. We'll look for projects that a project has been identified by NBRC or a state as addressing a time-sensitive issue of magnitude or severity that will be addressed by the proposed project. And construction takes place in 2 or more eligible counties. So these are all of the kind of requirements for that $5 million award. And that's how we will determine your eligibility for that higher maximum. This determination will be made at time of pre-application. And then further descriptions of these project categories, the feasibility, implementation, and combination of the 2 are in our program user manual, which is on our website. And I'll ask my other NBRC staff on the call to share the link to the Timber for Transit program webpage, so it's easily accessible for you all. All right, as promised, here are the program investment priorities listed here as they are in the manual. I won't go through and read each one, but again, please look through these. They're important. Again, for that higher $5 million maximum, you'll want to show that your project addresses at least 2 of these. All right, I'm going to get into a little bit of our NBRC policies and requirements, just going into a little bit further detail. All of this, again, is within our user manuals and program material on the website, so it's not the only time that you'll be able to see it. So that information is in multiple places. We'll go through match and cost share, the period of performance, ineligible purposes, program income, use of funds, the notice to proceed, NEPA requirements, the federal funding ceiling, and the Buy American preference. First, match and cost share. Match is defined as the minimum amount of funds or contributions that need to come from other sources to complete the NBRC funded project. All Timber for Transit program awards have a required minimum match determined by the distress level of the county the project is located in. So recall our distressed, transitional, and attainment counties and the associated match requirements. We understand some projects have total costs that require funds in addition to the NBRC award and our minimum required match in order to complete the project. So we refer to that excess required funding amount as cost share. And the reason I'm explaining that is just because we refer to cost share and match in our program materials. It's all defined there as well, but sometimes match and cost share can get confused. We understand at time of pre-application that not all match and cost share funding will be secured, but we'll ask you for some information on your secured or planned match sources at time of pre-application. So be prepared to provide some detail. We expect projects to be completed within a 3-year time period. Our grant agreements cover that 3 years. This is important to note because if you anticipate the project cannot be completed within a 3-year time period, we encourage you to delay application until you expect the project to be completed within that time frame. For your knowledge, for spring awards, we anticipate a start date of September 1st. And for fall awards, we anticipate a start date of January 1st, 2025. I'll just cover one ineligible purpose that tends to come up, which is that funds cannot go to for-profit entities. Funding that moves through an NBRC eligible entity in the form of cash or equipment, for example, to an ineligible entity will be seen as pass-through funding and is not an eligible cost. If you anticipate program income as a result of your project, this will be treated according to the deductive method, which is a subtraction from the cost of your project. More details on program income can be found in the Federal Code of Regulations, or 2 CFR, which is linked here. And again, more information in our program materials on the website. All right, for eligible uses of funding, NBRC funds may be used to match other federally funded projects only when the total grant funds from NBRC and other federal funders does not exceed 80% of the total project budget. You'll want to check if you have other federal funders as a part of your funding stack, what their requirements are, as sometimes they differ. But for NBRC, federal funding, including ours, can only make up 80% of the total project costs. If NBRC funds are used to purchase or construct real property, that requires the federal government maintain an interest in that property for 20 years. Ineligible costs include maintenance, whether it's routine or deferred, or allowance or payments of debts. Of course, there are other ineligible costs which are listed in our program user manual, but those are a couple of costs that tend to come up often. All right, now I'll cover the notice to proceed. So not all agencies refer to their okay to spend funds as a notice to proceed, but the notice to proceed for NBRC represents permission from the commission, meaning we have completed all the due diligence necessary for spending of the NBRC award and the match funding to begin. Note that an environmental review for the project must be completed prior to issuance of the notice to proceed. The National Environmental Protection Act, or NEPA, environmental review is important to consider as you plan for the timeline of your project. So for planning purposes, we've shared a little bit here. Typically, projects fall within one of 3 NEPA considerations. Projects that don't have construction, renovation, or in-the-ground disturbance generally fit within the categorical exclusion category. The NEPA review will be relatively quick in this case, only a couple of weeks and no significant cost associated. Second, your projects may fit within CADEX, which is short for categorical exclusion, but may require additional consultation, for example, with the Historic Preservation Office within your state. For planning and budget purposes, this NEPA level review may take a few months and cost between $1,500 and $3,000 to complete. For projects that include significant construction, in-the-ground disturbances, or potentially a major renovation, you'll want to plan for 6 to 12 months of NEPA review and a more significant cost. Again, I mentioned the 80% federal funding ceiling. Only 80% of project costs, including NBRC share, can come from federal sources. Again, important to check with other federal agencies on their requirements, as they might differ. These questions come up often. So the Community Development Block Grant Program funding from your state does not count towards the federal cap. Loans do not count towards the federal cap. Yeah, and check with the other federal sources. Another consideration at this time is the Build America Buy American Act, which is a preference for domestically sourced materials for construction. NBRC has more details on our implementation policies for BABA, B-A-B-A-A, and that is linked here and on our website. All right, I'm going to pause for a moment in the event there are questions in the chat that I can answer.
Hey Marina, it's Sarah. The chat has been very quiet. I've posted resources for folks, including the Timber for Transit webpage, NEPA guidance, and BABA guidance links, all to our webpage as well. But no questions yet. But maybe folks have some and want to raise their hand and ask them now.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. I'll keep us moving and we'll have more time for questions later on. All right, the next section we'll dive into the pre-application process. We'll cover timeline, process and requirements, and evaluation. I'll go over briefly the state role in pre-applications and then what to expect after you've submitted your pre-application. So right now we're doing program information sessions. The online pre-application system opens in later this month or early March. Again, we're working to wrap up kind of getting that system operational, our grants management system. So that will be a really exciting layout this year. Round 1 pre-applications will be due by 5 p.m. March 15th. Again, those waivers, either the significant benefit waiver or the 75% expenditure waiver, are due at time of pre-application. So be sure to know early on whether or not that applies to you. If you have questions about those waiver requirements, please email us at admin@nbrc.gov. All right, and then the first round Timber for Transit program pre-application review will take place between March 19th and 30th. And then we have committed to providing feedback and invitations to apply, responses generally to your pre-applications the week of April 1st. Again, we have this new grants management system. We'll be providing detailed guidance later this month or early in March for this system. It will require you to create an account, essentially to register and answer some pre-application questions. For today, we'll go over the questions that will be asked as part of this pre-application. The system will ask about your organization, basic details such as the name, address, the type of applicant, your EIN number, project contacts, etc. To receive an award, you will need a UEI number. If you don't have one, prior to pre-application is a great time to register, which you can do for free at sam.gov. If you're invited to apply, all of this information that you've already submitted at the time of pre-application will be carried over into your application, so you won't have to resubmit that. Now that you've registered, you'll be asked additional pre-application questions. We ask if you're a previous NBRC award recipient, for example. This helps us track how many new applicants we have, as well as that 75% expenditure requirement. We'll also ask if your project serves a rural community with a population less than 5,000. You'll be asked at this time to share the primary place of performance, essentially where the project takes place. Again, this may not necessarily be the address of the applicant entity. You'll be offered an opportunity to provide the zip code, county, and an option for latitude and longitudinal coordinates even, so you can get as detailed as you like. And then you'll be asked for a project title. For the budget, there are two components that you'll need to provide at the pre-application phase. The first is a budget narrative. This is a text box where you'll be asked to list and describe expenses over $5,000. You'll be asked to list out match sources in a table and the status of that match source, whether it's committed or secured, pending, and commitments or expected commitment dates. You'll then be asked for a more detailed budget, which will show us how project funds will be allocated across cost categories, including how NBRC and cost share funds will be allocated across the budget. These are the budget categories listed here. You'll be able to list costs according to the category associated. If you've applied for NBRC funds or federal funds generally in the past, you might be familiar with the SF 424 CBW form. These categories listed here align with that form exactly. So new this year, we won't be asking you to submit the full SF 424 CBW form at time of pre-application, but rather kind of a summary of what you anticipate your costs will be. And then at time of application, we'll then ask you to submit that 424 CBW really detailed budget sheet. And because we're laying it out this way with the same budget categories and all, our hope is that from pre-application to application, that it's easy to kind of transfer the information, update your budget with any new costs, estimates, and all of that. So again, 424 CBW not required at time of pre-application, but it will be expected if you are invited to apply to submit with your application. All right, now we have your registration, your organization information, as well as a sense of budget. Next, you'll be asked some narrative questions. Each text box has a 10,000 character limit, which is about 2 to 3 pages of space. We encourage you to develop your responses separate from the grants management system in a Word document so that you can make sure it's all ready to go, and then you'll be able to copy and paste that information into the grants management system. The first in this section is the project abstract. You'll be asked to provide a summary, identify the project category, describe the status of the project, and what is the overall project scope, tasks, and activities. And then you'll be asked to provide the anticipated time frame for completion of the project. Next, you'll be asked to explain your project goals, outcomes, and outputs. You'll be asked to list and explain the expected economic outcomes. If you're not familiar with the economic outcomes NBRC looks at, we have a list and associated descriptions in Appendix G of the Timber for Transit user manual, again on our website. You'll then be asked how to list and explain how your project addresses the investment priorities for the project. Again, those investment priorities were listed in a prior slide and are in our user manual as well. The fourth narrative question relates to project beneficiaries and community context. This is your opportunity to share who the project will benefit and why it matters to the community. You may also explain the demographics of the community and, if applicable, how the project helps increase community resiliency in the face of climate threats. Lastly is the statement of need. We'll ask about the challenge or problem the project seeks to address, the proposed solution and importance of the project at this time, and why NBRC funding specifically is important. And then that's the end of the pre-application, at which point you'll hit submit and your project will be in the hands of NBRC and our state program managers. All right, at this time, NBRC will look at eligibility and alignment with our program priorities. NBRC will also consider the costs and associated benefits of the funding for your project, as well as the benefits to the broader region. We will also consider projects that are identified as a state priority. So these are considerations above and beyond what is laid out in the scoring criteria. The state program manager role in the Timber for Transit program is to assist in project development, to review and assess pre-applications for alignment with the Timber for Transit priorities, and to issue invitations to apply. After pre-applications are submitted, projects can expect to hear back the week of April 1st with the status of their project and information from NBRC. That may be an invitation to apply. If applicable, we may provide feedback for the application. It may be a recommendation to submit in a future round with feedback, again, if applicable. Or it may be an ineligibility determination. What's next? So at this time, if you haven't already started, now is the time to start to develop your project concept and application. You'll want to determine eligibility and match requirements. Again, those first few slides we went through today, is your project in a location, in an eligible location? Is it addressing the program priorities and investment criteria and meet an eligible purpose for the program? Are you submitting all the required waivers? Do you have that all lined up? What will your match requirement be? All of those things we went through today. You want to classify the project according to the Timber for Transit program project categories and investment priorities. So is it a feasibility or implementation project? And which of those investment priorities does your project address? And then we encourage you, even though scoring will not happen at the pre-application stage, to self-evaluate against the scoring criteria in the user manual. And you may want to schedule a meeting with your state program manager if further discussion is needed. However, if you have a question about an NBRC policy or which program your project fits best in, please come to NBRC for those questions and email admin@nbrc.gov. I've listed that email address in a later slide, so you'll have that available. If you have questions related to the relevance of your project within your state and state priorities, or, you know, whether your project will be really competitive. Those are questions that you could go to your state program manager for. All right. Again, further details and information about the grants management system will be made available, we hope, very soon, within the next few weeks or very early in March. The Timber for Transit program user manual will be updated as well. You'll notice that part 2 has kind of a summary of the pre-application. We'll provide some more details in there in the coming weeks. And then this is also just a reminder that registration will be required at time of pre-application. So I encourage, as soon as you can get into that grants management system, to get in there, register, and take a look at the questions you'll be asked, and then start to write out your answers in a Word document. Again, pre-applications are required, and any given project can only be associated with one of NBRC's funding programs at a time. So we will ask that you not submit the same project for the Catalyst program, the Timber for Transit program, and the Forest Economy program, but rather choose one. You'll only be considered for one program. There is no rule if you have 2 different projects and one fits well in the Catalyst program and one in the Forest Economy program or Timber for Transit program, for example. You can apply for separate projects among our programs, but again, we would also discourage that. You'll be competing kind of against yourself in that sense. All right, stopping again for questions here. I didn't see too much in the chat. It looked like questions got answered, but Sarah, feel free to come off and let me know if that's not true.
I think we're all caught up in the chat. I just want to let folks know that Christy Farnham from Vermont has put her email address. If you're an applicant from Vermont, you'll want to reach out to Christy, and all of our other state program manager contact information is right there on the slide.
You were way ahead of me. Yes, so I have some contacts here on this next slide. A few of NBRC staff contacts, and then our state program managers are listed here, as well as their email addresses. All right, and then lastly here is my resources slide. I've linked the Timber for Transit program website. Our distress criteria is online, so if you want a little bit more details or you're looking into whether your municipality is an isolated area of distress within an attainment county, you'll find all of that information in our distress report. And then additionally, local development districts, while not required in this program, NBRC may require an entity to contract with an LDD who has opted into NBRC's LDD partnership program. And that's just based on capacity and whether an entity is able to conduct their project and also administer the grant with NBRC. And there is a link with a list of LDDs here on this slide, and they can also be found on NBRC's website.
This is Sarah again, and I'll just put in a plug for using your local development district to help you with your grant administration. If you've never administered an NBRC grant before, or a federal grant, these folks can be really useful in helping to keep track of your reporting deadlines, your match requirements, how to submit these things. And they're going to be trained in using the grants management system, so they can help you with navigating that. So I strongly encourage using an LDD to assist you with your grant management side of your project.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, I'll stay on for a few moments for any further questions. And then at 10 o'clock, we'll be transitioning to the Forest Economy Program information session. We'll cover all the same policies and pre-application details during that session. But some different details on the forest economy program specifically and the purpose and investment priorities. All right, well, hearing no questions, I'm going to close out. If you are staying on or you want to listen into the Forest Economy Program info session, you'll just want to re-click that link. Closing this out now will allow us to have 2 separate recordings. So thank you all for accommodating us in that.
Thanks, Marina.
Thanks, Sarah.